secretariat that does. Commissioners also do that. But commissioners take away this knowledge after 5 years. For example, the commissioners who were recruited recently, in the recent recruitment, these commissioners will run the 2032 election, then they will go away. They came without knowledge to run an election. They are now acquiring knowledge to run an election. Once they are now at the peak of their competency, they go home. What do they use it for? If we are looking for commissioners who will first take time to get the knowledge, secondly, use that knowledge in order to efficiently and effectively run electoral management body, then we have to ask ourselves, do we need this election to have a tenure of 6 years? Our commissioners have a tenure of 6 years because there is something called constitutional commissions. And the constitutional commissions are established by Chapter 15 of the Kenyan Constitution. And Chapter 15 of the Kenyan Constitution makes an omnibus provision that every single commissioner, whether you are with the Judicial Service Commission or IEBC, you only serve 6 years. Now, that could be good for NIC and all the others. But in IEBC, like I've told you, it takes 2 years for you to be proficient, sufficiently qualified to run an election. IEBC commissioners should have a longer tenure than what they're having 6 years now. I've just given you the example of this one. You can go back to Chebukati. When Chebukati ran the first election as chairman, Chebukati barely had 1 year's experience. When Chebukati ran the second election as chairman, Chebukati now had that accumulation of experience. Then he went home. All right? Then he went home. And Chebukati, then he went home. Now, you're having these fresh ones. They came without doing an election. I saw when there was an election in Mombasa, I think there was a by-election in Mombasa, and a commissioner who had been in the commission for a month or so was addressing the press in Mombasa and was speaking as an expert. And it struck me as very strange because where he was speaking, there was an expert from IEBC. And with a bit of humility, he would have said, so and so on, yes, answer this question. But now, after they have run this election, they'll have known now how to run an election, right? Because there is no university where you run this election. Then they go home. The problem is bigger than IEBC itself. It is a design issue which needs a larger conversation, and that conversation cannot be led by IIC. The same with the equipment.
This is an independent commission.
Yes.
A constitutionally independent commission.
Right.
That means that the operationalization of the constitutionally bound elements have to be carried independently, at least led independently by this commission. Is there a problem, and whether it's on the spend, whether it's the operations, whether it is selections, is there a problem with the lived experience of this independence that could lead to some of these problems that we're seeing? Because no matter how you slice it or color it, there are problems that you have to decide. The IEBC is almost told what to do. So my question is to independence, that perhaps if this independence was lived out, we would not be having some of the problems that we are seeing here.
Your answer presupposes...
Is IEBC truly independent?
Your answer presupposes that Kenya wants a truly independent IEBC.
Yes.
Does it?
It does. The Constitution even says that it should have one.
No, the Constitution does. But do we really want a truly independent IEBC?
As a set, yes.
Question one?
Yes.
Question one? Question two?
Yeah.
Can we live with one? A truly independent IEBC?
If it's, and I think you've answered the question by the question that you've asked, because it's then clear that the independent independence in the IEBC does not exist in totality. Number two, because Kenyans have never actually experienced what it is like to have a truly independent IEBC in name and in operation, that you can't then say, do they truly want one? Because they've never experienced one. But I reckon that if they experienced an independent IEBC where they worked according to the book and they were void of influence from politicians, it's like saying, you're the referee, but how about you wear our team colors? Yep. If they truly experienced it, perhaps they would say, yes, this is how we ought to operate. But they've never had the opportunity to do that.
Let me put this to you. Today, the first question you've been asking me is about this 61 billion.
Mm.
And you're saying, will they get the funding? This is a constitutional commission doing its job, going basket in hand, begging for money to run an election. It doesn't have the money. The easiest way to manipulate a constitutional or any other body is to starve it of funds. So if you truly wanted, the first thing that I recall the current president doing when he came to power was to say the judiciary will have the kinds of fund that they're looking for.
Financial autonomy.
Financial autonomy. Now, so the Kenyan judiciary, by and large, has that financial autonomy. Remember, they had been denied this by the previous administration. So to redress that, they said, we'll give you financial autonomy. Today, as we are speaking, IEBC is totally bereft of any inkling of financial autonomy, number one. And the easiest way to make sure they are dependent on you, one way or the other, is to deny them that. They don't have that. Two, I gave you the example of here's an IEBC with 6 commissioners or 8 commissioners. 4 of them have resigned for one way or the other. And they remain with the chairman and 2 commissioners. Now, the Supreme Court ruled that for purposes of the operation, 3 was enough. But the legislature, in its own wisdom, had given IEBC a larger number of commissioners. I think there are 8, and plus the chairman. Why would IEBC go for almost 4 years with only 2 commissioners instead of 8?
Yeah.
It's not IEBC to recruit themselves. Somebody must do it.
Now,
but when that other person or power felt that it was now necessary to recruit, they did the recruitment.
And IEBC sat back and said, okay, well, since now you've decided that it's time to recruit, let's sit back and wait. And that's the problem, James. It's at day 2 and we're using this same statement. Things don't go wrong. They start wrong. Even with the recruitment of commissioners, who sits on those panels? You have people who are party affiliated. You have people who are government affiliated. And they're the ones who are deciding who becomes a commissioner. How do you then expect to have independence and autonomy later on in the day, whereby the secretariat, as Dennis has said, is intact? And you can actually say, according to the Constitution, these people who come and decide who will be commissioners should not be the ones deciding, because then they come later, they control how you spend, they control what you do, they'll control whether you will say or not say. And that's the problem. James, it starts wrong. It doesn't go wrong.
I agree with you.
And it's 8 o'clock.
And that is why I asked you the question. One day I was in a philosophy class, and we were told, the simpler the question, the more difficult the problem. And he said, for generations, apples were falling from trees and falling down. Nobody asked themselves, why does an apple fall from the tree down? Until somebody in the 17th century related that to gravity. All right, that is Newton.
Yes.
It was a simple thing. So that's why I asked you earlier on, do we really want an independent IEBC? Question number 1. Question number 2, I asked you, can we live with it? Because if we really want one, then we have to look at the constitutional and legal structure. How do we redo it? Number 2, to say, how do we ensure from finance to everything? Today we say Kenya ran the most expensive election in the world. That is true. But why is it so difficult for us who are complaining that Kenya is running the most expensive election? Why can't we do the necessary intervention and ask IEBC, make this one work? But we are waiting until such time that things go wrong, then we say IEBC messed.
It started wrong. A very good morning, James Oswago, Major